My name is Ava Sanders. I grew up in a small town in Missouri, where the winters cut through your skin and the silence inside our house felt even colder. I was never a child who was loved, not in the my parents were busy kind of way, but in the way that made it clear they never wanted me to exist. When I was 12, I taught myself how to bake through YouTube so I could make my mom a birthday cake. I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, my hands covered in flour, pouring everything I had into a vanilla cake with pale lavender frosting, her favorite color. When she saw it, all she said was, "Looks like someone threw up, get rid of it." I still smiled, thinking, maybe she's just tired. By 14, I was spending hours every night helping my younger brother with algebra. In return, he slammed his book shut and shouted in my face, "You think you're so smart? Get lost." I backed away, hands trembling, and shut myself inside my room. That door didn't just block out sound. It slowly walled off my heart from anything called family. At 16, I took a job at a small grocery store. My first paycheck was $120. I handed all of it to my dad, thinking I was helping the family get by. A week later, he slammed a bill on the table and growled, "You think that's helping? You're just dead weight." I had nothing left to say. What I used to think was love turned out to be just expectations and endless demands. Then, on my 17th birthday, I came home from school and opened the door to an empty kitchen. No voices, no luggage, no TV, no familiar jacket slung over the couch. Just a single piece of paper on the counter, scrawled in blue pen. "You'll figure it out." No apology, no explanation. My parents and my brother were gone. I wandered around like a ghost for the rest of that night. When I asked the landlord, he said they had terminated the lease early. I had 7 days to leave the apartment. I had one suitcase, a torn backpack, and about $40 in my wallet. I crashed at a friend's place for 3 nights. After that, no one picked up my calls. No one wanted to get involved with a girl whose own family had dumped her. I used all the money I had left to rent an old storage unit at the edge of town. No windows, no outlet. I laid a thin blanket on the concrete floor and curled up, surrounded by damp air and cold metal. Each morning, I sneaked showers at the YMCA. At noon, I used the library's free computer to look for jobs. Dinner was peanut butter eaten straight from the jar, with the same spoon. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Eventually, I got a night shift as a kitchen helper at a small diner near the bus station. No contract, no uniform, just a manager named Rhonda with bright red curls and eyes that didn't trust easily. But that first night, when I nearly collapsed at the sink, she handed me a cold sandwich and said, "Eat. You're no good to me passed out." She never asked where I lived, never said much at all. Just gave a small nod and tossed me the keys to the back shed. "If you need to crash, no one needs to know." That's how I survived my first winter. Washing my clothes by hand in the sink, drying them behind the stove, saving every spare coin in a tin hidden under the bread rack. When I finally scraped together enough to buy a cheap prepaid phone, I started watching personal finance channels on YouTube. They talked about budgets, emergency funds, and living below your means. I soaked it in like water in a desert. I printed one job application form and walked from block to block, leaving it anywhere that had a "Hiring Now" sign. It took nearly 4 months before I got a call to work as a temp in a private office, clearing old files and digitizing documents. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid triple what dishwashing did. I arrived first, left last. If I didn't know how to do something, I Googled it. I learned Excel, how to write professional emails, how to organize data, all from free videos on a battered phone with a dying battery. Angela, the office secretary, noticed me by the 3rd week. "You pick things up fast," she said. "Wanna try being a data assistant? My team needs part-time help." I said yes immediately, even though I had no idea what a data assistant actually did. I just knew it was my way out of survival mode. From there, things started moving. I took on freelance gigs, data entry, spreadsheets, basic report analysis. I worked weekends, spent hours at the library using free Wi-Fi, learning new skills while working jobs I didn't yet feel qualified for. By 22, I quit the diner for good and became a full-time freelancer. I no longer slept in a storage unit or lived off peanut butter. I rented a small room in a low-income apartment complex in Des Moines, Iowa. Not fancy, but it had a window and a lock of my own. Over the next 3 years, I built a client base, sharpened my skills, data analysis, presentations, project management. I still remember the first invoice I ever sent for $500, and the client didn't negotiate. At 25, I launched my own consulting firm. My first office was a folding table in my kitchen. My laptop was a hand-me-down from Angela. But I had clients, and they came back. 3 years later, I had 5 contract employees, steady work with 3 large firms that once lived only on my impossible dreams list. I had full health insurance, paid off all my emergency-era credit card debt, and moved into a cozy apartment on the west side of the city. By 29, I opened my banking app and saw a 7-figure balance, not the kind people screenshot to flex online, but a real account, with a retirement fund, with savings, with enough that I'd never have to sleep in a storage unit again. I cried, not from happiness, but because I had survived. All those years, not one person from my family reached out. No messages, no calls. It was as if they tore me out of their lives like ripping a calendar page. And I finally learned how to stop waiting. One day, the podcast I appeared on about being abandoned by family suddenly went viral, with over 1 million plays in just 4 days. And then, they found me. 12 years had passed since the day I stood frozen in that empty kitchen, holding the crumpled note that said, "You'll figure it out." I thought I'd never hear another sound from them, until that podcast about children abandoned by their families crossed a 1 million mark in just a few days. My inbox exploded. Messages from strangers, words of encouragement, stories from people who had also been cast out by the people who were supposed to love them. And then I saw it. A subject line so fake it made my stomach turn. "Eva, you're still my daughter." My hands trembled as I opened the email. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a short paragraph, cold and detached. "I just listened to your podcast. Maybe we should talk. There might still be a chance to mend things." I read that sentence dozens of times, not because I was moved, but because I couldn't believe how calculated and hollow it all sounded. Less than an hour later, another email came. From Tyler, my younger brother. "Are you really doing okay now? I just heard the podcast. I miss you. Maybe we could meet up?" No explanation, no apology, just a vague suggestion, like the past 12 years had been some minor misunderstanding. I shut the laptop, didn't reply. But something unsettled me. I spent the whole evening cleaning the apartment, walking aimlessly around the neighborhood, trying to shake the feeling of being dragged back into something I thought I had left behind. At therapy the next morning, I told Dr. Mason everything. She sat quietly for a moment, then said gently, "Eva, you're allowed not to respond, but if you need closure, if you need to be sure that walking away was the right thing, you could choose to speak only to the one who hurt you the least." I thought about it. The only one of the 3 who ever showed a flicker of warmth, even if faint, was Tyler. So I typed a single line. "Where?" We picked a small cafe in Denver, where I lived. I arrived early and chose the most hidden corner. My heart pounded when I saw Tyler walk in. His hair was shorter, his shirt looked worn. He looked older than 28, and the arrogance in his eyes was gone. Tyler approached hesitantly. "Eva, I stayed quiet as he sat down across from me, clutching his coffee cup like it was the only anchor he had left. I, I don't know where to begin, he said quietly. I only learned the truth about a year ago. I looked at him, waiting. I was 16 back then. I thought you chose to stay behind. Mom said you wanted to live with a friend, that you had plans. I didn't understand, but I didn't question her either. 16 isn't a child, I said calmly. You could have called, you could have emailed. You didn't. He lowered his head. I know. I was a coward. I didn't deny it. After a long silence, Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photo, me and him standing in front of my 13th birthday cake. I remembered that moment. It was the last year I still believed I could make our mother smile. I kept this all these years, he said, his eyes turning red. I always wondered, if I had said something that day, would you have stayed? I stared at the photo. Not out of emotion, but because I no longer recognized the girl in it. That version of me had died the moment I read, "You'll figure it out." So why now? Why not when I was living in a storage unit? Or when I sent out my first job application? The question caught him off guard. Because I was scared. I didn't know what to say. And then, when I heard the podcast, I saw that you had made it, that you were okay, and thought I'd be willing to forgive? He didn't answer, but his silence was an answer in itself. A week after that meeting with Tyler, I got a call from an unknown number. I nearly didn't answer, but some part of me, the part that had once lost sleep over unanswered questions, forced my finger to hit accept. Eva. Her voice was the same, raspy, thin, and so familiar it made my spine go cold. It's Mom. I said nothing, just waited to see what she wanted. I listened to the podcast again. I just wanted to talk. Not to justify anything, just to explain. I stayed silent. Back then, things were really hard. Your dad lost his job. We were drowning in credit card debt and behind on rent. Tyler was still little. I know it wasn't fair to you, but we couldn't afford to raise all three. Her voice cracked like she was emotional, but to me it sounded like a speech she had rehearsed in the mirror. You were the strong one. I thought you'd figure it out. Someone would help you. Maybe you'd end up in some kind of care center, maybe even better off than at home. I laughed. You don't know anything. I hung up before the emotions caught up with my voice. I didn't want her to hear it shake. I didn't want her to think she still had that kind of hold on me. 2 days later, I got an email from my father, the man I hadn't heard from in 12 years. Eva. I know you're still angry, but what's in the past should stay in the past. Your mom's sick. Tyler's about to have a baby. We don't have much time left. We should help each other, like a real family. I heard you're doing well now, so it probably wouldn't be hard for you to cover a few debts. Consider it filial duty. No apology, no remorse. Just a list of veiled demands hidden behind manipulative words. I froze. In that moment, everything became clearer than ever. I typed a very short reply and sent it to both of them. I don't owe you anything. Then I deleted their contacts, blocked their numbers, and filtered their emails as spam. I didn't expect a response, but Tyler was different. He showed up that same afternoon, knocking on my door with heavy eyes. You're really going to turn your back on Mom and Dad? I looked directly at my brother. I let out a small laugh. No bitterness, just the smile of someone who finally sees the true face of those who once broke her. If Grandma hadn't left me anything, would you be here? Silence. I didn't need their answer. Their eyes confessed everything. I turned to Daniel. Do they have any legal rights left? He shook his head slightly. None. Mrs. June handled it all. And under the will, the entire estate is yours. Without conditions. My father leaned back, exhaling as if he'd heard a death sentence. My mother stood rigid, fists clenched. Then she spat out words like a slap. "You'll regret this. A kid like you knows nothing about running a whole empire." I didn't blink. I know that a child once abandoned, survived, learned, rose, and now runs that empire. And you? You showed up only when you smelled money. Daniel stepped beside me, ready to close the matter, but I raised a hand. I had one last thing to say. I looked at my father, the man who'd gripped my shoulder like a stranger during that drive 10 years ago, and said, "I don't hate you for leaving me. I hate that even now, you still don't see what truly matters." My mother's eyes widened, about to argue, but Daniel signaled the usher at the back. "I'm afraid we must end this meeting. If you wish to contest, we'll see you in court." I remained motionless as they walked out of the little room in the church. They didn't look back. And this time, I no longer wished they would. I glanced at my palm. The key lay there, icy, razor clear like the truth. I whispered to myself, "You saw this coming, didn't you, Grandma?" Walking into the hall, sunlight streamed through stained glass and hit me head-on. A strange feeling washed over me. Lightness. I no longer had to prove anything to them. I only had to live up to the trust of the one person who had truly loved me. After the tense confrontation, Daniel asked me to stay a moment. He placed a thick ivory envelope on the table, the handwriting unmistakably Grandma's, the same script on notes, reminding me to take a coat or wishing me luck in lunch boxes all those years. "Ivy, open only when you're truly ready." I remained in the small room behind the church. It was so quiet I could hear the paper rustle as I tore the seal. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from knowing Grandma June was no longer there to explain anything. The first sheet held just one line. "If you're reading this, everything has unfolded exactly as I expected." I sank into a chair, drew a deep breath, and began to read. "My dearest Ivy, if this letter is in your hands, your parents have likely returned, just as I once feared and just as I prepared for. There are things I never wanted you to know, but now you deserve the whole truth, so you never blame yourself for even one more second. When you were 8, your parents, Robert and Diana, tried to transfer all my assets and shares in the Richardson Foundation into their names while I was traveling on business in Denver. They did it behind my back, using documents stolen from my office safe. They thought I was just a principal, an old, simple woman too naive to manage an investment system. They were wrong. I found out early. Instead of suing them, I called them in one last time and gave them 2 choices. Leave Charleston forever and never return, or I'd expose everything publicly. They chose the money, and to protect their image, they also chose to leave you behind. No hesitation, no apology. I had to pause. My throat tightened. I gripped the page until it crumpled. So, I wasn't abandoned out of poverty or hardship, as I had comforted myself. I was left because I was worth less than a botched investment. I read on. "I hid this truth not because you were weak, but because you deserved a childhood free from greed and betrayal. You needed a chance to grow up believing you were still loved. And if I had to do it again, I would shield you just the same. But now that you're strong enough to face them on your own, you must know, none of this was your fault. They didn't leave because you weren't good enough. They left because they weren't kind enough. I was no longer that child staring down the road, wondering if love could return in a rearview mirror." She continued, "You are a Richardson, and we, women with this name, don't topple easily. I didn't leave you this estate for revenge. I left it for you to build. If they come back, they'll try everything. Sweet words, tears, even lies. But remember this, a decade without their presence didn't break you. It shaped you. You're here not by accident, but by strength, and you owe no one an explanation for that. Use the key not only to open a safe, but to open whichever door you choose, a door to freedom, kindness, and power they never imagined you could wield." Love doesn't come from blood, Ivy. True love comes from action, from choosing to stay when things are hardest. And I chose you every single day. With love. Rama. I folded the letter, placed it on my lap, and sat in silence for a long while. There was no more anger inside me. Only clarity. That I wasn't abandoned because I wasn't enough. I was left behind. Because I was a threat to their greed. And that, contrary to everything I once believed, didn't make me weaker. It made me stronger. I no longer needed an old key. I was ready to open a door of my own. 3 months after the funeral, I thought everything had finally settled. I spent most of my time at the Richardson Foundation headquarters, taking over the scholarship programs Grandma June had established, getting familiar with the legal team, accounting division, and the investment board she had personally run for over 2 decades. I learned to ask questions, read financial statements, analyze risk. Everything was new, but I walked in as someone who'd been waiting for this chance my entire life. But those who once abandoned me didn't disappear so easily. During those 3 months, my parents took turns sending complaints to the law office, hiring 2 separate legal firms to try overturning Grandma June's will. Their reasons kept changing. From her mental health was unstable, to the will was drafted under pressure, even claiming Ivy lacks the capacity to manage the estate and requires temporary financial guardianship. All attempts were denied. Each time they failed, I thought it would be over. But then, on a Monday morning, I got a call from the front desk. Ivy, they're here. They don't have an appointment, and they're refusing to leave. I left the meeting room immediately, walking straight into the main lobby of the high-rise building where the sign read, Richardson Foundation, since 1971. And, just as I expected, there they were. Robert and Diana, dressed like they were attending a business conference, but their eyes flared, like they were ready to slam fists on the table. I descended the marble steps. The sound of my heels echoed across the lobby. My mother spoke first. Ivy, we need to talk. Privately. My expression didn't change. Every legal matter from you has been answered by counsel. If you continue to cause disruption at headquarters, I will have security escort you out. My father cut in, his voice tight with restrained fury. Her granddaughter has no right to run a foundation of this size. This is a family estate, and we're the only legal relatives left. I gave a small smile and nodded to security. Then please proceed to conference room 4. We'll talk one last time. 10 minutes later, under bright lighting and behind closed, soundproof glass, we sat facing each other. I was at the head of the table. My parents sat across. No blood ties anymore. Just the final distance of a long, bitter battle of will. I began. You left me 10 years ago. No explanation, not even a letter. And now you return. Not for me, but because she left more than you could ignore. My mother flushed. We already said it was a mistake. But we have rights. You can't make all the decisions alone. I pulled a copy of Grandma June's handwritten letter from my file folder, placed it on the table, gently slid it toward them. If I need to present this to the full board, I will. In it, she clearly states that the 2 of you once conspired to seize her assets. And when you failed, you chose to leave me behind like some burden. My father tried to argue, but no words came. My mother looked at the letter like she was staring at a sealed verdict. I looked at them directly, my voice calm but stripped of any trace of softness. Don't tell me I'll regret this. I've lived 10 years without either of you, and not once have I felt regret. But who will the media believe? My mother murmured, playing her final card. They might see a story about an orphaned granddaughter stealing an unclear inheritance. I straightened, fingers brushing the collar of my deep blue blazer, the same one Grandma June wore during her first board meeting at the Richardson Foundation. I stepped closer, voice firm as steel. Then tell the whole story. Tell them you abandoned your daughter at 8 years old, that you tried to steal from her grandmother, that for an entire decade you never reached out. Not a birthday, not a word. Until you heard the number $42 million. I paused, then added slowly, "If you're going public, don't leave anything out." Silence filled the room. Then my father stood first, grabbing his briefcase. He didn't look at me. My mother followed, her shoulders trembling slightly. They left without a word, and this time I knew they wouldn't be back. I returned to my seat, letting myself sink into the chair. The late-day sunlight filtered through the thick glass, casting a glow over the framed photo of Grandma June smiling from the corner of the desk. I gave a subtle nod. The final move had been made, and I, the girl once abandoned on a porch with a worn-out teddy bear, had not lost. A few days after that last confrontation, attorney Daniel Shore sent me a short email. Just one line. "Ivy, it's time to watch the final video." I met him in Grandma June's office on the top floor of the Richardson Foundation. Everything in the room had been kept exactly as it was when she was alive. The polished oak desk, the vase of dried lavender by the window, and the calendar frozen at the month she passed. Daniel plugged in a USB drive, then stepped back, letting me sit alone in front of the screen. The monitor lit up, and then she appeared. It was still her face, gentle, dignified, and quietly firm. She wore the sky blue cardigan I'd helped her wash last winter. Her voice rang out, slow and steady, just like every time she used to teach me something at the dinner table. "If you're watching this video, Ivy, then everything has unfolded just as I expected. And if that's the case, it's time for you to hear the most important part." She paused, eyes fixed on the camera as if she were looking straight at me. "I didn't just leave you money. Numbers can't protect you. What I left you was a mission." The screen shifted to a montage. Children's faces, some in worn-out clothes, standing in front of rural schools, mobile health units, and low-income housing communities. Among them, a young girl sat reading in a quiet library corner, funded by the Richardson Foundation. I quietly created the Bright Roots Foundation, a private branch of the Richardson Foundation dedicated to helping abandoned children, those in the foster care system, and students no one believes in. I was once a child no one chose. And then I met people brave enough to give me a chance. I want you to do the same for others, not because you're wealthy, but because you know exactly what that feels like. I held my breath. In that moment, I didn't feel alone. All the pain I once carried, being abandoned, being silenced, suddenly became a bridge to other children out there. He ended the video with one short sentence. "You're not just the heir. You're the continuation." The screen faded to black, but something in me had just turned on. 2 months later, I stood in the main boardroom where the sign Richardson Foundation had just been engraved with a new line. "In honor of June Richardson, a legacy of belief." I officially became the executive director of both the Richardson Foundation and the Bright Roots Foundation. At first, many were skeptical. An 18-year-old girl stepping into the role once held by a seasoned educator of 30 years? But during my first board meeting, I wore her old wool blazer and presented a 3-year plan to expand STEM scholarships for rural girls. I delivered my presentation clearly, with no appeal to emotion. When I finished, there was no applause, just the quiet nods of those who had once worked beside her. They didn't have to say it. I knew. They saw her in me. I didn't change her office. I kept her desk, and even the old ticking wall clock stayed just as it was. And I still commuted in the 2001 Toyota Corolla she left behind, even though I could afford any car on the market. It was a symbol, not of thrift, but of roots. And every time I stepped out of that car, badge around my neck reading executive director, I didn't think of power. I thought of the children who were never chosen. The girls, still waiting on a donated laptop to learn to code. The boys, no one had ever asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I didn't use wealth to prove my worth. I used it to create value. And I knew if she were standing in that hallway, watching me through the glass, she'd nod, smile, and say, "You did it, Ivy. Not just survived. You made it matter." Ivy's story isn't just a journey to reclaim justice. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes true family doesn't come from blood, but from those who choose to stay when everyone else walks away. Ivy turned pain into purpose, inheritance into responsibility. She didn't just survive abandonment, she rose to lead a mission of compassion, passing on light to children once forgotten, just like she once was. What do you think about Ivy's decision? Would you have the strength to do what she did? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life.